The night Celine Beaumont appeared on Caleb Hunter's doorstep in a wedding dress worth more than his house, she wasn't looking for shelter from the cold. She was running from a life that would destroy her if she stayed. And Caleb, a broke single father who could barely afford Christmas dinner, was about to make the one choice that would either save them both or ruin everything he had left. If you want to see how a warehouse worker and a billionaire heiress fight their way through betrayal, scandal, and impossible odds to build something real, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Caleb Hunter's hands were numb by the time he pulled into the driveway. The truck's heater had quit working 3 weeks ago, and he hadn't had the money to fix it. December in northern Michigan didn't care about broke single fathers or their broken-down vehicles. The cold just kept coming. He sat in the cab for a moment longer than necessary, staring at the rental house through the cracked windshield. The porch light was out again. He'd have to fix that tomorrow. Add it to the list of things he couldn't afford to ignore much longer. The house was small, drafty, and painted a sad shade of gray that looked worse in winter. But it was theirs, barely. Inside, the babysitter was packing up her things. Mrs. Chen was 72 and charged less than anyone else in town, which was the only reason Caleb could afford her at all. "He's already asleep," she said, pulling on her coat. "Ate all his dinner, asked about the Christmas tree again." Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. "Yeah, I know. You're a good father, Caleb. Don't forget that." He nodded, too tired to argue. Mrs. Chen meant well, but good fathers didn't make promises they couldn't keep. Good fathers didn't work 60-hour weeks and still come home to past due notices shoved under the door. After she left, Caleb walked quietly down the narrow hallway to his son's room. The door was cracked open and he could see Evan curled up under 2 blankets, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. 6 years old and already tougher than most grown men Caleb knew. The kid had been through more loss than anyone should have to carry. Caleb pulled the blankets up higher and brushed the hair back from Evan's forehead. His son stirred, but didn't wake. Somewhere in the back of Caleb's mind, a voice whispered the same thing it always did. "You're failing him." He turned away before the thought could settle too deep. In the kitchen, Caleb opened the fridge and stared at the contents like they might magically multiply. Half a carton of eggs. Some expired milk he'd have to toss tomorrow. A pack of bologna that was supposed to last the rest of the week. He grabbed a beer from the bottom shelf, the last one from a 6-pack he'd bought 2 months ago, and sat down at the table. The stack of bills was still there, right where he'd left them that morning. Electric, water, rent, all overdue. He'd gotten an extension on the rent, but that was running out fast. The warehouse job paid just enough to keep them alive, but not enough to get ahead. Never enough to get ahead. Caleb drank half the beer in one pull and let his head fall back against the chair. He was tired, not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, the kind that lived in his bones. It had been 4 years since Sarah died. 4 years since the cancer took her in less than 6 months. So fast he barely had time to understand what was happening before she was gone. 4 years of trying to be both parents to a kid who still asked when mommy was coming home. 4 years of pretending he had any idea what he was doing. He finished the beer and crushed the can in his fist. The knock at the door came so suddenly that Caleb almost didn't believe it was real. It was nearly 11 at night. Nobody knocked on his door at 11 at night. He stood slowly, his body protesting after 10 hours of lifting boxes in a freezing warehouse, and walked to the front window. He pulled the curtain back an inch. A woman stood on his porch. No. Not just a woman in a wedding dress. Caleb blinked, certain he was seeing things. But she was still there, shivering violently, her arms wrapped around herself. The dress was massive, white and glittering even in the dark, and she was crying. He opened the door. The cold hit him first, sharp and bitter. Then he saw her face. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe 30, with dark hair falling loose around her shoulders and makeup smeared down her cheeks. She looked up at him, and for a second, neither of them spoke. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't know where else to go." Caleb stared at her. "Who are you?" "Celine." She hugged herself tighter. "Celine Beaumont, Her voice cracked. "I need help." The name didn't mean anything to him. He glanced past her at the empty street, then back at her face. She looked terrified, lost. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head quickly. "No, I just—" She stopped, her breath hitching. "Please, I can't go back there." Caleb hesitated. Every instinct told him this was a bad idea. He didn't know this woman. He didn't know what she was running from or why she'd ended up on his doorstep in the middle of the night. But she was freezing, and she was scared, and he couldn't just leave her out there. He stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come inside." She hesitated for only a second before stepping past him into the house. The dress made a soft rustling sound as she moved, and Caleb caught the faint scent of expensive perfume mixed with cold air. He closed the door and locked it. Celine stood in the middle of his tiny living room, looking completely out of place. The dress took up half the space, and she kept her arms wrapped tight around herself, like she was trying to hold herself together. Caleb didn't know what to say. "You want some coffee or something?" She nodded, not looking at him. He walked into the kitchen and started the coffee maker, an old machine that took forever to brew and made noise like it was dying. While it worked, he grabbed a blanket from the couch and brought it back to her. "Here." She took it without a word and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her hands were shaking. Caleb leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. "You want to tell me what's going on?" Celine looked down at the floor. "I was supposed to get married tonight. I figured that part out." "I couldn't do it." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I stood there in front of everyone, and I just couldn't." Caleb waited. She finally looked up at him, and he saw something raw in her expression. "I don't even know why I came here. I just started driving and ended up in your neighborhood. I saw your light on and She stopped. "I'm sorry, this is insane." "Yeah," Caleb said. "It kind of is." She laughed, but it came out broken. "I'll leave. I just needed a minute to—" "Sit down," Caleb said. She blinked at him. "You're freezing and you're upset. Sit down, drink some coffee. Then we'll figure out what to do." Celine stared at him for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if she could trust him. Finally, she nodded and lowered herself carefully onto the couch, the dress pooling around her like a cloud. Caleb poured 2 cups of coffee and brought them into the living room. He handed one to her and sat down in the armchair across from the couch. For a minute, they just sat there in silence. "What's your name?" Celine asked quietly. "Caleb." "Do you live here alone?" "No, I've got a son. He's asleep." She nodded slowly, holding the mug between her hands like it was the only warm thing in the world. "I'm sorry for barging in like this." "You already said that." "I mean it." Caleb took a sip of his coffee. It was too hot and tasted like burnt water, but he drank it anyway. "So what now? You got family you can call?" "No?" The word came out flat. "Not really." "Friends?" She hesitated. "Not the kind I can trust right now." Caleb frowned. "What about the guy you were supposed to marry?" Celine's expression went cold. "Especially not him." There was something hard in her voice that made Caleb stop pushing. He didn't know what kind of situation she'd walked away from, but it was clear she wasn't going back. "You can stay here tonight," he said, "but just tonight. Tomorrow, you figure out where you're going." She looked at him, surprised. "You'd let me stay?" "I'm not going to throw you out in the cold. You don't even know me." "No," Caleb said. "But you showed up at my door in a wedding dress crying your eyes out. I'm guessing you've had a rough night." Celine's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't look away. "Thank you." Caleb stood and set his mug down. "There's a couch in the back room. It's not much, but it's warm. I'll get you some blankets." He walked down the hall and grabbed the extra bedding from the closet. When he came back, Celine was still sitting on the couch, staring at the wall like she was trying to process everything that had just happened. Caleb set the blankets down on the armchair. "Bathroom's down the hall if you need it. I'll be up early for work, so try not to make too much noise." "Okay." He turned to leave, then stopped. "You gonna be all right?" Celine looked up at him, and for the first time since she'd knocked on his door, she almost smiled. "I don't know, but I think I'm better than I was an hour ago." Caleb nodded. "Get some sleep." He left her alone and walked back to his room, closing the door quietly behind him. He sat on the edge of his bed and rubbed his hands over his face. This was insane. He just let a complete stranger into his house in the middle of the night. A stranger in a wedding dress who wouldn't tell him what she was running from. But something about the way she'd looked at him, like she was barely holding herself together, had made it impossible to say no. Caleb lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'd be gone. back to whatever life she came from. And he'd go back to his. It didn't matter, except somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that maybe it did. Morning came too fast. Caleb's alarm went off at 5:30, the same as every day. He dragged himself out of bed, pulled on his work clothes, and walked into the kitchen. The house was quiet. Celine's coat was still draped over the back of the couch, but the back room door was closed. He made coffee and drank it standing by the sink, watching the sky turn from black to gray through the window. Snow was coming. He could feel it. At 6, Evan shuffled into the kitchen, still half asleep, wearing his dinosaur pajamas. He climbed into his chair at the table and rubbed his eyes. "Morning, buddy," Caleb said. "Morning, Dad." Caleb poured cereal into a bowl and set it in front of him. "You sleep okay?" Evan nodded, already shoveling cereal into his mouth. "Mrs. Chen's coming by again tonight. I'll be home late." Evan looked up at him. "Are we getting the tree today?" Caleb's chest tightened. "Not today, bud. Soon." "You said that last week." "I know." Evan went back to his cereal, and Caleb hated himself a little more. A sound from the hallway made them both turn. Celine stood in the doorway, still wearing the wedding dress, her hair tangled and her face pale. She looked like she'd barely slept. Evan's eyes went wide. "Whoa." Celine froze, clearly not expecting to see a kid at the table. Caleb set his mug down. "Evan, this is Celine. She's staying here for a little bit." Evan stared at her. "Are you a princess?" Celine blinked, then laughed softly. It was the first real sound of lightness Caleb had heard from her. "No, not a princess." "You look like one." "It's just a dress." Evan nodded seriously, then went back to his cereal like this was the most normal thing in the world. Caleb looked at Celine. "You want some coffee?" "Please." He poured her a cup and handed it to her. She took it carefully, like it might break. "Thank you," she said quietly. Caleb checked the clock. "I've got to leave in 10 minutes. You need anything before I go?" Celine shook her head. "I'll be fine." He didn't believe her, but he didn't have time to argue. He grabbed his coat and his keys and kissed the top of Evan's head. "Be good for Mrs. Chen." "Okay." Caleb looked at Celine one more time. "Lock the door behind me." She nodded, and then he was gone. The warehouse was freezing, as always. Caleb spent the next 10 hours loading trucks, moving pallets, and trying not to think about the woman in the wedding dress currently sitting in his house. It didn't work. By the time his shift ended, his back was screaming and his hands were raw. He climbed into his truck and sat there for a minute, letting the exhaustion settle over him like a weight. When he finally pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on, fixed. He frowned. Inside, the house smelled like food. Real food, not cereal or bologna sandwiches. Caleb walked into the kitchen and stopped. Selena was standing at the stove, still in the wedding dress, stirring something in a pot. Evan was sitting at the table, coloring, chattering away about dinosaurs. Celine looked up when Caleb came in. "I hope you don't mind. I found some pasta and made dinner." Caleb stared at her. "You cooked?" "It's not much, just spaghetti." "In a wedding dress." She glanced down at herself and smiled faintly. "I didn't have anything else to wear." Evan looked up from his drawing. "Celine fixed the light, Dad, and she knows all the dinosaur names." Caleb didn't know what to say. Celine set the spoon down and wiped her hands on a dish towel. "I know I said I'd leave, but..." She hesitated. "I don't have anywhere to go yet. If it's okay, I'd like to stay a little longer, just until I figure things out." Caleb looked at her, then at his son, who was smiling wider than he had in weeks. He should say no. He should tell her this was a bad idea. But the house felt warmer than it had in years, and Evan looked happy, and Caleb was too tired to fight it. "One more night," he said. Selena's expression softened. "Thank you." And just like that, everything changed. One more night turned into 3, then 5, then a week. Caleb told himself he'd put his foot down, tell her she needed to leave. But every time he worked up the nerve, something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Evan laughed more than he had in months. Maybe it was coming home to a house that didn't feel empty anymore. Or maybe it was just that he was too damn tired to care. Celine had borrowed some of Sarah's old clothes from the boxes in the garage. Jeans that were a little too short on her, sweaters that hung loose. She looked nothing like the woman who'd shown up on his porch in a wedding dress, and somehow that made it easier to pretend this arrangement made sense. She'd taken over small things without asking, fixing the broken cabinet hinge, organizing the pantry, teaching Evan how to make paper snowflakes that now covered every window in the house. Caleb didn't know what to do with any of it. On the 8th night, he came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table with a laptop he'd never seen before, her face lit by the screen. "Where'd that come from?" he asked, dropping his keys on the counter. Celine looked up, startled. "I had it in my car, finally went back to get it." "You've had a car this whole time?" "It's parked 2 streets over. I didn't want anyone to see it." Caleb opened the fridge and grabbed a beer. "Who's looking for you?" She hesitated. "A lot of people, probably." That's not an answer. Celine closed the laptop slowly. "My family. My ex-fiancé. The press." Caleb turned to look at her. "The press?" She met his eyes. "I wasn't lying when I said my name. Celine Beaumont. My family owns Beaumont Technologies. We make software, hardware, cloud infrastructure. If you've used a computer in the last 10 years, you've probably used something we built." Caleb stared at her. "You're serious?" "Yeah." "So you're rich. I was supposed to be." She looked down at her hands. "The company's worth about $8 billion. My father built it. When he died 2 years ago, it went to me and my brother. But there are conditions. Family board members, investors, people who think they know better than I do how to run my own life." Caleb sat down across from her. "And the guy you were supposed to marry? Marcus Hale. His family owns half the commercial real estate on the East Coast. The marriage was supposed to merge the companies, create this unstoppable empire." She laughed bitterly. "Everyone thought it was perfect, the power couple of the decade. But you didn't love him." Celine looked at him like he'd just said something in a foreign language. "Love wasn't part of the deal." Caleb drank his beer and said nothing. "I know how that sounds," Celine said quietly. "Like I'm some spoiled heiress complaining about her perfect life. But I spent the last 5 years building that company into something real. I worked 70-hour weeks. I fought every old man on the board who thought I was too young or too female to know what I was doing. And I won. I made it work." Her voice cracked. "And then they told me the only way I could keep it was to marry Marcus. Sign over half my shares. Let him make the decisions. So you ran." "So I ran." She wiped her eyes quickly. "And now I don't have anything. No company, no family, no plan." Caleb set the beer down. "You've got a laptop and a car. That's more than most people." She looked at him, surprised. "I'm not saying your problems aren't real," Caleb said. "But you're sitting here acting like your life is over because you walked away from $8 billion. Most people in this town would kill for a fraction of that." Celine's face flushed. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm just saying you've got options. You're smart. You can rebuild." She stared at him. "You really believe that?" "Yeah, I do." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Evan ran into the kitchen wearing his pajamas, holding a drawing. "Celine, look, I made you." Celine took the paper and studied it. In crayon, Evan had drawn 3 stick figures standing in front of a house. One tall, one medium, one small. "That's you, and that's Dad, and that's me," Evan said, pointing. "We're a family." Caleb's chest tightened. Celine's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "It's perfect, Evan. Thank you." Evan beamed and ran off again, leaving the drawing on the table. Celine looked down at it, her fingers tracing the edges. "He's a good kid." "Yeah, he is. You're a good father." Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he just finished his beer. That night, after Evan was asleep, Celine stayed up late in the living room. Caleb heard her moving around and finally gave up on sleep. He found her sitting on the couch with her laptop again, the glow of the screen casting shadows across her face. "You ever sleep?" "But," he asked. She looked up. "Not much lately." Caleb sat down in the armchair. "What are you working on?" "Shit. Trying to figure out my next move. I've got some money in accounts Marcus doesn't know about. Enough to start over if I'm careful. Start over doing what? Celine hesitated. I don't know yet. Maybe something that actually matters. Your company didn't matter? It made rich people richer. I'm tired of that. She closed the laptop. What about you? You ever think about doing something different? Caleb laughed. Every day. But thinking about it and doing it are two different things. Why? Because I've got a kid depending on me. I can't just walk away from a steady paycheck because I'm tired of freezing my ass off in a warehouse. Celine studied him. You don't talk about his mother. Caleb's jaw tightened. No, I don't. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, her name was Sarah. The words came out rougher than he intended. We were together since high school, got married young, had Evan right after. He stopped. She was good. Better than me. And then she got sick, and 6 months later she was gone. Celine's expression softened. I'm so sorry, Caleb. It's been 4 years. I should be over it by now. That's not how grief works. Caleb looked at her. You sound like you know. But, My father died 2 years ago. Heart attack in his office. I found him. She swallowed hard. Everyone kept telling me I needed to move on. Be strong. Take over the company like nothing happened. So that's what I did. And I haven't stopped running since. Caleb leaned back in the chair. Maybe that's why you ended up here. Maybe. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Finally, Celine spoke. Can I ask you something? Yeah. Why did you let me stay? Caleb thought about it. I don't know. You needed help. Most people would have called the cops. I'm not most people. She smiled faintly. No, you're not. The next morning, Caleb woke to the sound of voices in the kitchen. He walked in to find Celine and Evan making pancakes together, flour everywhere, both of them laughing. Dad! Evan shouted. We're making shapes. Look, this one's a dinosaur, shits. Caleb looked at the lumpy pancake on the griddle. That's a dinosaur? It's a stegosaurus, Celine said, completely serious. Caleb shook his head and poured himself coffee. This was getting out of hand. He needed to sit Celine down and have a real conversation about how long she was planning to stay. Set some boundaries. Figure out what the hell they were doing. But then Evan handed him a pancake shaped vaguely like a truck, and Celine smiled at him over the stove, and Caleb didn't say anything. That afternoon, Mrs. Chen showed up early. She took one look at Celine and raised an eyebrow. You must be the girl in the wedding dress, she said. Celine blinked. Evan told you? Evan tells me everything. Mrs. Chen set her purse down. How long are you staying? I'm not sure yet. Mrs. Chen looked at Caleb. You know what you're doing? No, Caleb said honestly. Good. At least you're not lying to yourself. She patted his arm. I'll watch Evan tonight. You two figure this out. After she left with Evan for a trip to the library, the house felt too quiet. Caleb found Celine in the back room, folding laundry. Sarah's laundry. You don't have to do that, he said. I don't mind. Celine, I know. She set down the shirt she was holding. I know I can't stay here forever. I know this isn't real. She stopped. I'm not ready to go back yet. Back where? To that life. The boardrooms and the lawyers and people who only see me as a signature on a contract. She looked at him. Here, I'm just me. Nobody expects anything. Nobody wants anything. It's the first time I've felt like a person in years. Caleb crossed his arms. This isn't some kind of escape fantasy. This is my life. And it's hard and it's messy, and it doesn't stop being that just because you're here. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're hiding. Celine's eyes flashed. And what are you doing? You think I don't see it? You work yourself to death and come home to a house that's falling apart, and you don't let anyone in because you're too afraid of losing something again. Caleb stiffened. You don't know anything about me. I know you haven't touched anything in that garage. I know those boxes have your wife's name on them, and you can't even look at them. I know you're so busy surviving that you forgot how to actually live. That's not fair, isn't it? Celine's voice broke. We're both hiding, Caleb. You're just doing it in a different way. The silence stretched between them, sharp and painful. Finally, Caleb turned and walked out. He spent the next hour driving around town with no destination, his hands gripping the wheel too tight. She was wrong. She had to be wrong. He wasn't hiding. He was doing what he had to do. For Evan. For their future. But the words kept echoing in his head. When he finally came back, it was dark. Celine was sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket, her breath visible in the cold air. Caleb sat down next to her. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I had no right to say those things. You weren't wrong. She looked at him, surprised. Caleb exhaled slowly. I haven't been in that garage since Sarah died. I kept telling myself I'd deal with it later, but later never comes. And yeah, maybe I'm hiding. Maybe I'm too scared to let anyone in because I don't think I can survive losing someone again. He looked at her. But you're hiding too, and we both know it. Celine nodded, tears sliding down her face. I don't know how to stop. Me either. They sat there in the cold, not touching, just existing in the same broken space. After a while, Celine spoke. What if we helped each other? What do you mean? I don't know. Maybe we stop running. Both of us. Figure out what we actually want instead of just surviving. Caleb looked at her. And how do we do that? I have no idea. She laughed, but it sounded fragile. But I think staying here is a start. For me, anyway. Caleb thought about it. About Evan's drawing on the kitchen table. About coming home to a house that felt warm. About the way Celine looked at him like he was worth something. Okay, he said. Okay, you can stay. For real this time. Not just one more night. Celine's breath caught. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She smiled through her tears. Thank you. Caleb stood and held out his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. Inside the house was quiet. They stood in the living room, neither of them quite knowing what to do next. I should probably get my stuff from the car, Celine said. Make this official. Yeah, probably. But neither of them moved. The moment stretched, fragile and uncertain, until Celine finally stepped back. I'll do it tomorrow, she said. Okay. She went to the back room, and Caleb stood alone in the living room, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. Over the next 2 weeks, something shifted. Celine stopped hiding. She brought her things into the house, set up her laptop at the kitchen table, started making phone calls to lawyers and accountants. She was building something. Caleb could see it, even if he didn't fully understand what. And Caleb stopped pretending everything was fine. One Saturday, he finally opened the garage. Celine didn't say anything, just stood beside him as he pulled out the boxes one by one. Sarah's clothes, her books, the wedding album he hadn't been able to look at in years. You don't have to do this alone, Celine said quietly. I know. They went through it together, slowly, and when Caleb finally broke down halfway through, Celine just held him and didn't try to fix it. Evan noticed the change, too. He started calling Celine by her name instead of the lady in the dress. He asked her to read him bedtime stories. He drew more pictures, always with 3 people. And late at night, when Evan was asleep and the house was quiet, Caleb and Celine started talking. Really talking. About Sarah and about Celine's father. About the lives they had lost and the ones they were trying to build. One night, Celine told him about the foundation she was planning. Something to help families like his. Childcare support. Emergency funds. Resources for single parents drowning in bills. You think it'll work? Caleb asked. I don't know, but I have to try. Why? She looked at him. Because someone helped me when I had nowhere to go. I want to be that person for someone else. Caleb felt something crack open in his chest. Another night, Caleb told her about the promise he'd made to Evan. The Christmas tree they still didn't have. We'll get one, Celine said. I can't afford it. Then I'll buy it. No. Caleb, I said no. He stood up, frustrated. I don't need your money. I don't need you to fix my problems. Celine stood too. I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm trying to help. It's the same thing. No, it's not. She stepped closer. You've given me a place to stay. You've let me be part of your life. You've helped me more than you know. Let me do this one thing, please. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to push back, but the look in her eyes stopped him. Fine, he said. But we split it, half and half. Celine smiled. Deal. The next day, they drove to a tree lot on the edge of town. Evan ran ahead, pointing at every tree like it was the best one he'd ever seen. That one, Dad! No, that one! Wait, that one! Caleb and Celine followed behind, and for the first time in years, Caleb felt something close to normal. They settled on a crooked pine that leaned slightly to the left. The guy running the lot gave them a discount because it was the last one nobody wanted. Perfect, Evan declared. Back at the house, they set it up in the living room. It barely fit, and the lights were a tangled mess. But Evan didn't care. He hung ornaments with fierce concentration while Celine handed them to him one by one. Caleb stood back and watched, something warm and terrifying building in his chest. That night, after Evan was asleep, Caleb and Celine sat on the couch, the tree lights casting soft shadows across the room. Thank you, Caleb said quietly. For what? For this. All of it. Celine looked at him. You don't have to thank me. Yeah, I do. She shifted closer, and Caleb felt the space between them shrink. Caleb. His phone rang. He pulled it out and frowned at the screen. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Caleb Hunter? A woman's voice, sharp and professional. Yeah, who's this? My name is Victoria Ashford. I'm a reporter with the Detroit Herald. I'm calling about Celine Beaumont. Caleb's blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Hunter, we have sources confirming that Miss Beaumont has been staying at your residence for the past 2 weeks. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Caleb hung up. Celine was staring at him. Who was that? A reporter. They know you're here. Her face went pale. How? I don't know, but they know. Celine stood, her hands shaking. This is bad. If they know, Marcus knows. The board knows. They'll come after you. They'll destroy your life just to get to me. Then we deal with it. You don't understand. These people don't stop. They'll dig up everything. Your job, your finances. Evan, they'll use it all against you. Caleb stood too. So what do you want to do? Run again? I don't know. Because if you leave now, they win. You know that, right? Celine's eyes filled with tears. I can't drag you into this. You already did, the second you knocked on my door. She stared at him, and Caleb saw the fear in her face, but he also saw something else, something that looked like hope. I'm not asking you to fight my battles, Caleb said, but I'm also not letting you face this alone. So you need to decide right now, are you staying or are you running? Celine's breath hitched, and then finally she nodded. I'm staying. The article hit the internet at 6 in the morning. Caleb saw it before he even got out of bed. His phone buzzed with a text from a coworker, then another, then 5 more in rapid succession. He opened the first link and felt his stomach drop. Billionaire heiress Celine Beaumont hiding out with warehouse worker after ditching wedding. There was a photo. Grainy, taken from across the street, but clear enough. Celine getting out of her car in front of his house, wearing Sarah's old coat. The caption underneath speculated about everything from a nervous breakdown to a secret affair. Caleb sat up and rubbed his face. This was exactly what Celine had warned him about. He walked into the kitchen and found her already awake, sitting at the table with her own laptop open, staring at the same article. They're calling me a gold digger, she said flatly. And you're either my victim or my accomplice, depending on which outlet you read. Caleb poured coffee. You read the comments? Unfortunately. Don't. Too late. She closed the laptop. Marcus released a statement an hour ago. He's very concerned about my well-being. He hopes I get the help I need. That's a nice way of saying you're crazy. Yeah, that's the point. Celine stood and walked to the window, her arms crossed. The board's going to use this. They'll say I'm unfit to run the company, that I'm erratic and irresponsible. And they'll be right. You're not any of those things. She turned to look at him. I ran away from my own wedding and moved in with a stranger. That's pretty much the definition of erratic. Or brave. Celine laughed, but there was no humor in it. The world doesn't reward women for being brave. It punishes them. Caleb's phone rang. He looked at the screen and felt his chest tighten. He looked. It was his supervisor at the warehouse. I have to take this, he said. He stepped into the hallway and answered. Yeah? Hunter, it's Doug. We need to talk. About what, Buck? About the fact that your face is all over the news with some billionaire. You got any idea how many calls corporate got this morning? Caleb leaned against the wall. It's not what it looks like. I don't care what it looks like. I care that we've got reporters trying to get into the warehouse asking questions about you. You're a liability right now. So what are you saying? Me. Doug sighed. I'm saying take a few days off. Let this blow over. We'll figure it out after the holidays. Doug, it's not a request, Hunter. Go home. Stay off the radar. I'll call you next week. The line went dead. Caleb stood there for a minute, the phone still pressed to his ear, trying to process what had just happened. He'd been benched, not fired, but close enough. And all because Celine's world had crashed into his. When he walked back into the kitchen, Celine took one look at his face and knew. They suspended you, she said. Told me to take a few days off. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Yes, it is. Her voice cracked. This is exactly what I was afraid of. They're going after you because of me. Then we fight back. How? They have lawyers and PR teams and unlimited money. What do we have? Caleb set his phone down. The truth. Celine stared at him. The truth doesn't matter to people like Marcus. He'll twist it into whatever he wants. So we don't let him. And how do we do that? Well, Caleb didn't have an answer, but before he could say anything, Evan walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. Why is everyone yelling? He asked. Celine wiped her face quickly. We're not yelling, buddy. Just talking. Evan climbed into his chair. Are you sad? A little. Is it because of the computer people? Celine blinked. What? The people on your computer. The ones who say mean things. Caleb and Celine exchanged a look. Evan shrugged. Mrs. Chen says people who say mean things are just sad inside, so you shouldn't listen to them. Celine's eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time she smiled. Mrs. Chen is very smart. I know. Evan grabbed the cereal box. Can we build a snowman today? Maybe later, Caleb said. I need to take care of some things first. But the things kept piling up. By noon, 3 more news outlets had picked up the story. One of them tracked down Mrs. Chen and tried to interview her. She told them to leave her alone and slammed the door in their face, but not before someone got a photo. Caleb's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, mostly, but also a few people from town asking if the rumors were true. He stopped answering. Celine locked herself in the back room for most of the afternoon, on the phone with her lawyers. When she finally emerged, she looked exhausted. What'd they say? Caleb asked. That I should go back to New York and do damage control. Issue a statement. Apologize to Marcus publicly. You're not going to do that. I don't know what I'm going to do. She sat down heavily on the couch. If I stay here, they'll keep coming after you. If I leave, Marcus wins. Either way, I lose. Caleb sat beside her. So we make them stop. How? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. Celine looked at him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was brief, almost tentative, and when she pulled back, her eyes were wide with surprise, like she hadn't meant to do it. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I shouldn't have... Caleb kissed her back. This time it wasn't tentative. This time it was desperate and real, and 4 years of loneliness crashing into 2 weeks of something that felt like hope. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. That was... Celine started. Yeah. We shouldn't... Probably not. But neither of them moved. The moment shattered when Evan came running into the room, holding his tablet. Dad, look, you're on the internet. Caleb's stomach sank. What? Evan turned the screen around. It was a video, shaky and clearly filmed from a distance, of Caleb and Celine at the Christmas tree lot. The headline read, "Warehouse Worker and Billionaire Heiress Playhouse." "Someone filmed us," Celine said quietly. Caleb took the tablet and watched the clip. It was only 30 seconds, but it showed everything. Them laughing, Evan running between the trees, Celine's hand on Caleb's arm. It looked exactly like what it was. And that made it worse. "Turn it off," Caleb said, handing the tablet back to Evan. "Go play in your room for a bit, okay?" "Okay." Evan ran off, oblivious to the weight of what he'd just shown them. Celine stood and walked to the window. "This isn't going to stop. You know that, right? As long as I'm here, they're going to keep watching, keep filming, keep digging. So let them." She turned. "You can't mean that." "Why not? We're not doing anything wrong. You're staying here because you needed help. That's it." "That's not what it looks like." "I don't care what it looks like." Celine's voice rose. "Well, you should, because when they're done with me, they're going to come after Evan. They're going to dig into your finances, your past, everything. And they won't stop until they find something they can use." Caleb stood. "Then they won't find anything. Everyone has something. Caleb." The words hung between them, sharp and true. Caleb thought about the overdue bills. The cash-only paychecks he'd taken under the table 2 years ago when he was desperate. The night he'd considered stealing formula from the grocery store because Evan was screaming with hunger and his account was overdrawn. He'd never done it, but he'd thought about it. And if someone dug deep enough, maybe they'd find the desperation in his eyes during those months. Maybe that would be enough. "Let them dig," he said finally. "I've got nothing to hide." Celine searched his face. "You're sure about that?" "Yeah, I am." She stepped closer. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you matter. And because walking away from something that scares you is the same as letting them win." Celine's breath caught. "When did you get so brave?" "I'm not brave. I'm just tired of running." She kissed him again, softer this time, and Caleb felt something shift between them, something that couldn't be undone. When they finally pulled apart, Celine rested her forehead against his. "What are we doing?" "I don't know, but I don't want to stop." "Me either." That night, after Evan was asleep, they stayed up talking, really talking, about what this meant, about what happened next. "I can't go back to New York," Celine said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "So don't. But I can't just hide here forever either. Marcus and the board, they'll use this against me. They'll say I abandoned the company." "Did you?" She hesitated. "I don't know. I just know I couldn't stay in that life anymore. It was killing me." Caleb reached for her hand. "Then build a new one." "It's not that simple." "Why not? You've got money, resources. You're smart as hell. What's stopping you?" "Fear, probably." She laughed. "I've spent my whole life being told what to do, who to marry, how to act, what to wear. And I just went along with it because it was easier than fighting. But now I don't know who I am without all that." "You're Celine, that's enough." She looked at him. "You make it sound so easy. It's not, but nothing worth doing is." Celine squeezed his hand. "What about you? What do you want?" Caleb thought about it. "I want Evan to have a life that doesn't feel like survival. I want to stop choosing between groceries and heat, and I want—" He stopped. "What?" "I want to stop being scared all the time." Celine's eyes softened. "Of what?" "Losing people, failing, letting Evan down." He met her gaze. "Letting you down." "You won't." "You don't know that." "No, but I trust you anyway." Sat. The words hit Caleb harder than he expected. Nobody had said that to him in years. Nobody had trusted him with anything more than showing up to work on time. "I'm not good at this," he said quietly. "The relationship stuff. I haven't... Sarah was the only person I ever..." He stopped, frustrated. "I don't know how to do this without screwing it up." Celine leaned closer. "Then we'll screw it up together." Caleb laughed despite himself. "That's a terrible plan." "Probably, but it's ours." They fell asleep onto the couch that night, tangled together under a blanket. and for the first time in weeks, Caleb slept without nightmares. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, a black SUV pulled up in front of the house. Caleb saw it through the window and felt his pulse spike. Two men in suits got out and walked toward the front door. "Celine!" he called. She came into the living room and froze when she saw them. "It's Marcus." "Here? He sent his lawyers." Her face went pale. "This is bad." The knock came, sharp and authoritative. Caleb opened the door but didn't step back. "Can I help you?" The taller of the two men smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Hunter, my name is Richard Caldwell. I represent Marcus Hale and the Beaumont Family Trust. We're here to speak with Ms. Beaumont. She doesn't want to talk to you. I'm afraid that's not your decision to make." Celine appeared behind Caleb. "It's fine. I'll talk to them." "Celine, it's fine." She stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind her. Caleb watched through the window as she stood on the porch, arms crossed, while the lawyers talked. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see Celine's expression hardening. After 5 minutes, she came back inside and slammed the door. "What did they say?" Caleb asked. "They offered me a deal. Come back to New York, marry Marcus, sign over my shares, and they'll make all of this go away. The articles, the gossip, everything. And if you don't, they'll destroy me. Publicly. They've already got a dozen people ready to testify that I'm mentally unstable. Former employees who'll say I was erratic. Board members who'll claim I was incompetent. They'll take the company, and they'll make sure I never work in tech again." Caleb felt rage building in his chest. "They can't do that. They can. And they will." Celine's hands were shaking. "And that's not even the worst part." "What's the worst part?" "Oh, they said if I don't come back, they'll go after you, audit your taxes, investigate your custody of Evan, claim you're an unfit parent because of your financial situation." The words hit Caleb like a punch to the gut. They can't take Evan. They can try, and even if they fail, the process will destroy you. Legal fees, court dates, the stigma. Celine's voice broke. "I can't let that happen." "So what are you saying?" She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm saying I have to go back." "No." "Caleb, no." He stepped closer. "You walk out that door and get in a car with those people. You'll never be free. You know that. And if I stay, they'll ruin your life. They'll take Evan from you." "Let them try." "Yeah. You don't understand what you're up against." "Then help me understand." Caleb's voice rose. "Stop acting like you're the only one with something to lose here." Celine stared at him, her chest heaving. "I've lost everything once," Caleb said, his voice rough. "I know what it feels like. And I'm not going to stand here and watch you give up because you're scared. I'm not giving up. I'm protecting you. I don't need you to protect me. I need you to fight." "I don't know how." The admission hung between them, raw and desperate. Caleb took her hands. "Then we figure it out, together. But you don't get to make this decision alone." Celine's breath hitched. "What if I can't win?" "Then we lose together. But at least we tried." She closed her eyes, and for a long moment, Caleb thought she was going to pull away, going to walk out the door and disappear into that black SUV and out of his life forever. But then she opened her eyes and nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll fight." Caleb pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face in his chest. Outside, the SUV waited for another 10 minutes before finally driving away. That afternoon, Celine made a decision. She called her lawyers back and told them to prepare a counteroffensive. She wasn't going to hide anymore. She wasn't going to let Marcus and the board control the narrative. "I want to hold a press conference," she said. "Tell my side of the story. Make it clear that I'm not crazy and I'm not running away. I'm choosing a different life." Her lawyer hesitated. "That's risky, Celine. If you go public, there's no taking it back." "Good. I don't want to take it back." She spent the rest of the day drafting a statement. Caleb sat with her, reading over her shoulder, offering thoughts when she asked. "What do you think?" she said, turning the laptop toward him. Caleb read it. It was honest and fierce and didn't pull any punches. It talked about the pressure she'd been under, the impossible expectations, the way she'd been treated like a commodity instead of a person. "It's good," he said, "but it's missing something." "What?" The part where you explain why you're here, with me. Celine hesitated. I don't know if I should bring you into this more than you already are. I'm already in it. Might as well be honest about why. Ishaikites. She looked at him for a long moment, then started typing again. When she finished, she read the new section aloud. I didn't come to Michigan looking for a relationship. I came looking for refuge. What I found was something I didn't know I needed, a man who treated me like a person instead of a prize, a family who welcomed me without conditions, a life that felt real for the first time in years. I'm staying because I choose to. Not because I'm running away, but because I'm running towards something better. Caleb felt his throat tighten. You're really going to say that? Yeah, I am. People are going to tear you apart. Let them. The press conference was scheduled for 3 days later in Detroit. Selena's lawyers arranged everything, and the media coverage was immediate. Every outlet in the country wanted to know what the runaway billionaire heiress was going to say. The night before the conference, Caleb couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what would happen after Celine told the world the truth. Would it help? Would it make things worse? He found Celine in the kitchen, drinking tea at 2 a.m. Can't sleep either? He asked. She shook her head. Too nervous. Caleb sat down across from her. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Why? Because if I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I had. Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Celine smiled. That's worth a lot. They sat in silence for a while, just holding hands across the table. Finally, Celine spoke. What happens after tomorrow? I don't know. Are you scared? Terrified. She laughed softly. Me too. Caleb squeezed her hand. But we do it anyway. Yeah, we do it anyway. Sit. The press conference was held in a hotel ballroom in downtown Detroit. Cameras everywhere. Reporters crammed into every available space. Caleb stood in the back of the room with Evan, who was staying with Mrs. Chen in the lobby, and watched as Celine walked to the podium. She looked calm, confident. Nothing like the woman who'd shown up on his doorstep in a wedding dress crying. She read her statement without hesitation. Every word clear, every sentence deliberate. And when she got to the part about Caleb, she looked directly at the cameras. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for the same thing everyone deserves, the right to choose my own life. And I choose this one. The room erupted with questions, but Celine didn't answer them. She just stepped away from the podium and walked toward the exit. Caleb met her halfway. You did it, he said. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears. I did. What now? Now we see what happens. They walked out of the hotel together, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, and Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in himself, in her, for standing up and refusing to be broken. But the fight wasn't over yet. The backlash started within hours. Marcus Hale released his own statement that evening, carefully worded and dripping with concern. He expressed his disappointment in Celine's reckless behavior. He questioned her judgment. He suggested, in the politest possible terms, that she was having some kind of breakdown and needed professional help. The board of Beaumont Technologies followed up with their own announcement. Effective immediately, Celine Beaumont was being removed from her position as co-CEO, pending a formal review of her competency to lead the company. Her brother, Julian Beaumont, would assume sole control until further notice. Caleb read the statements on his phone while sitting in his truck outside the warehouse. He'd been called back to work earlier than expected, but the atmosphere had shifted. People who used to joke with him during breaks now avoided eye contact. His supervisor gave him the worst assignments, the ones nobody wanted, and made it clear he was on thin ice. When Caleb got home that night, he found Celine sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, her laptop open, phone pressed to her ear. She looked like she hadn't slept. I don't care what the optics are, she was saying into the phone. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. She paused, listening. Then we sue. I don't care how long it takes. Another pause. Fine, set it up. I'll be there tomorrow. She hung up and dropped the phone on the table. Caleb set his keys down. Bad day? They're trying to declare me mentally incompetent. My own brother signed off on it. Can they do that? They can try. My lawyers say it won't hold up, but the process alone will be humiliating. Psychiatric evaluations, depositions. They'll drag every mistake I've ever made into the light and use it as evidence that I'm unfit. Caleb sat down across from her. What about the company? Can you get it back? Maybe, if I fight, but it'll take years and millions of dollars in legal fees. And even if I win, the company won't be the same. Julian's already talking about merging with Marcus's firm. The whole thing I was trying to avoid is happening anyway. So what are you going to do? Celine looked at him, and he saw exhaustion in her eyes. I don't know. Part of me wants to walk away. Let them have it. Start over with something new. And the other part? The other part is angry. Really angry. Because they're not doing this because I'm incompetent. They're doing this because I'm a woman who said no. Caleb reached for her hand. Then make them regret it. A small smile crossed her face. You make it sound simple. It's not, but you've already come this far. Celine squeezed his hand. How was work? Then about as good as your day. That bad? People talk, and they're not quiet about it. What are they saying? Oh, Caleb hesitated. That I'm using you for money, that you're slumming it for attention, that we're both idiots. Celine's expression darkened. I'm sorry. Don't be, it's just noise. Noise that could cost you your job. I've had worse jobs. She looked at him. You're not worried? Of course I'm worried. But I'm not going to let them scare me into walking away from you. The words hung between them, and Celine's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you. Yeah, you do. She stood and walked around the table, and Caleb pulled her into his lap. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. I'm so tired of fighting, she whispered. I know. What if we lose everything? Then we lose it together. She pulled back to look at him. You keep saying that like it's easy. It's not easy, but it's true. Celine kissed him, slow and desperate, and for a few minutes, the rest of the world disappeared. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. What are we doing, Caleb? I don't know, but I don't want to stop. Me either, but I'm scared. Of what? Of dragging you down with me. Of Evan getting hurt because of this. Of losing the only good thing I've found in years. Caleb cupped her face in his hands. You're not dragging anyone down. We're in this together, all of us. Celine's breath hitched. You really mean that? Yeah, I do. She kissed him again, and this time it felt like a promise. Over the next week, things got worse before they got better. The media ran with the story. Every outlet had an opinion. Some painted Celine as a feminist hero standing up to a patriarchal system. Others called her unstable and reckless. A few suggested Caleb was taking advantage of a vulnerable woman. Caleb stopped reading the articles after the third one called him a deadbeat dad. At the warehouse, tensions came to a head when one of his coworkers, a guy named Tony, who'd never liked Caleb much, made a comment during lunch. Must be nice, Tony said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Getting a sugar mama to pay your bills. Caleb kept eating. I mean, that's what this is, right? Tony continued. She's loaded, you're broke, Tony, and suddenly you're playing house. Caleb set his fork down. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Come on, Hunter. We all know you can barely keep the lights on. Now you've got some billionaire living with you. You expect us to believe that's about love? Caleb stood. Yeah, I do. Tony laughed. You're pathetic. Caleb's fist connected with Tony's jaw before he even realized he'd thrown the punch. The fight lasted about 30 seconds before two other guys pulled them apart. Tony was on the ground, blood streaming from his nose, and Caleb's knuckles were split open. Doug, the supervisor, appeared out of nowhere. Both of you. My office. Now. In the end, Caleb got suspended for a week without pay. Tony got 3 days. Doug made it clear that if it happened again, they'd both be fired. I don't care what's going on in your personal life, Doug said, but you bring it into my warehouse again and you're done. Understand? Caleb nodded and left. When he got home, Celine took one look at his hand and went pale. What happened? I hit someone. Why? He said something about you. Celine grabbed the first aid kit from under the sink and started cleaning his knuckles. You can't keep doing this. Doing what? Defending me, fighting for me. You're going to lose your job, Caleb. I don't care. Well, I do. Her voice cracked. I care because you have a son who depends on you. I care because you're throwing away everything you've worked for because of me. Caleb pulled his hand back. That's not what's happening. Isn't it? You got suspended because you punched a guy for insulting me? How is that not throwing it away? Because some things are more important than a paycheck. Not when you have a kid to feed. The words hit like a slap. Caleb stood and walked to the window. You think I don't know that? You think I'm not terrified every single day that I'm going to screw this up? That I'm going to fail Evan the same way I'm failing at everything else? You're not failing. Yes, I am. I'm broke. I'm suspended. I'm 1 bad month away from losing this house. And now I'm in a relationship with someone whose life is so complicated that just being near me puts her at risk. So yeah, maybe I am throwing it away, but at least I'm doing it for something real. Celine stared at him, tears streaming down her face. I never asked you to do that. I know. But I'm doing it anyway. She crossed the room and grabbed his face in her hands. Then let me help, please. I have money, resources. Let me use them. I don't want your money. Why not? Because the second I start taking it, everyone who's calling me a gold digger will be right. I don't care what they think. Well, I do. Caleb's voice rose. I care because I've spent my whole life working for everything I have. I've never taken a handout. I've never asked for help. And I'm not starting now. That's not asking for help. That's called being in a relationship. It's called being dependent. And I can't do that. Celine stepped back, her expression hardening. So what? You'd rather lose everything than let me help you? If that's what it takes to keep my dignity, yeah. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Maybe, but it's how I feel. They stood there, both breathing hard, the space between them suddenly feeling vast. Finally, Celine spoke, her voice quiet. I can't watch you destroy yourself because you're too proud to accept help. And I can't be with someone who thinks money solves everything. The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Celine grabbed her coat. I need some air. She left before Caleb could respond. He stood alone in the kitchen, his hand throbbing, and wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Celine didn't come back for 3 hours. When she finally walked through the door, Caleb was sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. I'm sorry, she said. He looked up. So am I. She sat down beside him. I wasn't trying to insult you. I see you struggling and I want to help. That's all. I know, but it's hard for me. Accepting help. I've been on my own for so long that I don't know how to let someone in without feeling like I'm losing myself. Celine took his hand. You're not losing yourself. You're just sharing the weight. Caleb looked at their joined hands. I don't know if I know how to do that. Then we learn, together. He met her eyes. What if I can't? Then we figure it out. But you don't get to push me away because you're scared. Caleb swallowed hard. Okay. Okay? Yeah, I'll try. Celine leaned her head on his shoulder. That's all I'm asking. They sat in silence for a while, and slowly, the tension between them eased. Later that night, after Evan was asleep, Celine showed Caleb what she'd been working on. I've been talking to some people, she said, opening her laptop. Investors, philanthropists, people who believe in what I'm trying to build. The foundation. Yeah, I want to call it Second Chances. It'll provide financial support for single parents, childcare subsidies, emergency funds for people who are 1 paycheck away from disaster, job training programs. Everything I wish had existed when you needed it. Caleb stared at the screen. You're serious about this? Completely. I've already got commitments for $10 million in seed funding, and I've been talking to legislators about policy changes, making it easier for people to access benefits, raising minimum wage, actually fixing the system instead of just putting a Band-Aid on it. That's ambitious. I know, but I have to try. Because if I don't, what was the point of all of this? I walked away from everything. I have to make it mean something. Caleb looked at her. You really think you can change things? I don't know, but I have to try. He nodded slowly. Then I'll help. How? I don't know yet, but you shouldn't have to do this alone. Celine smiled. We really are a team, aren't we? Yeah, I guess we are. 2 days later, Marcus made his move. Caleb was at home when the knock came. He opened the door to find a woman in a business suit holding a clipboard. Caleb Hunter? Yeah, BC. My name is Linda Garrett. I'm with Child Protective Services. I'm here to conduct a home inspection. Caleb's blood went cold. Why? Oh, we received a report alleging that your home may not be a safe environment for your son. I need to come inside and assess the situation. Who made the report? I'm not at liberty to say. But Caleb already knew. Marcus. He let her in because he didn't have a choice. Linda Garrett walked through the house, making notes. She opened the fridge, checked the bedrooms, inspected the smoke detectors. She asked questions about Evan's schooling, his health, his daily routine. Caleb answered everything as calmly as he could, even though his heart was pounding. When she finally left, she didn't say much, just that someone would be in touch. Caleb closed the door and leaned against it, his hands shaking. Celine came out of the back room. What was that about? They're investigating me for Evan. Her face went pale. Marcus did this. Yeah. We have to fight this. How? If they decide I'm unfit, they can take him, and there's nothing I can do about it. Celine grabbed her phone. I'm calling my lawyers. This is retaliation and it's illegal. We can prove it. Celine, no, I'm not letting them do this. Not to you. Not to Evan. She walked into the other room, already dialing, and Caleb stood there feeling helpless. Over the next few days, the investigation continued. Another caseworker came by. Evan was interviewed at school. Caleb had to provide financial records, pay stubs, medical documents. Every moment felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then, just when Caleb thought things couldn't get worse, Celine got a call from her lawyer. They're offering a settlement, she said, staring at her phone. What kind of settlement? Marcus will drop this investigation into you if I agree to sign over my remaining shares in the company and issue a public apology for my behavior. He'll also agree to a non-disclosure agreement, which means I can never talk about what happened between us. Caleb felt his stomach turn. He's blackmailing you. Yeah, pretty much. You can't agree to that. If I don't, he'll keep going after you. He'll take Evan. He won't win. You don't know that, and I'm not willing to risk it. Caleb crossed the room and took her phone. Look at me. She did, her eyes red from crying. If you sign that deal, he wins. Everything you fought for, everything you've built, it's gone. And for what? So I can keep Evan safe? Yes. No. Caleb's voice was firm. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. Then what do? We fight together. No settlements, no deals. We take him on, and we win. Celine stared at him. What if we don't? Then we lose knowing we didn't give up. She took a shaky breath. You're asking me to gamble everything. I'm asking you to trust me. Celine closed her eyes, and Caleb could see the war happening inside her. Finally, she opened her eyes and nodded. Okay, we fight. Caleb pulled her into his arms, and she held on like he was the only solid thing in the world. The next day, Celine's lawyers filed a formal complaint against Marcus Hale and the Beaumont Technologies Board for harassment, defamation, and retaliation. They also filed an injunction to stop the competency hearing. The media picked it up immediately. Within hours, the story shifted. Articles started questioning Marcus's motives. Investigative journalists dug into the timeline and pointed out the connection between Celine's press conference and the sudden CPS investigation into Caleb. Public opinion, always fickle, began to turn. A few prominent women in tech came forward with their own stories about being pushed out of companies by male executives. A hashtag started trending, Protests were organized outside Beaumont Technologies headquarters, and Marcus, for the first time, was on the defensive. But the fight was far from over. The competency hearing was postponed but not canceled. The CPS investigation continued, though the caseworker admitted privately that they hadn't found any evidence of neglect. And every day, Caleb and Celine waited for the next attack. One night, Evan asked a question that broke Caleb's heart. "Dad, are they going to take me away?" Caleb looked up from the dishes he was washing. "What? No, buddy. Who told you that?" "I heard you and Celine talking. You said someone was trying to take me." Caleb dried his hands and knelt down in front of his son. "Listen to me. Nobody is taking you anywhere, I promise." "But what if they do?" "They won't, because I won't let them." Evan's lower lip trembled. "I don't want to leave you." Caleb pulled him into a hug. "You're not going to, I swear." Over Evan's shoulder, Caleb saw Celine standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. That night, after Evan was asleep, Celine made a decision. "I'm going to New York," she said. Caleb looked up from the couch. "Why?" "Because I need to end this, face to face. Marcus wants a war. I'll give him one. But I'm doing it on my terms. You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. Because the longer this drags out, the more it hurts you and Evan, and I can't live with that." Caleb stood. "Then I'm coming with you." "No, you need to stay here with Evan. Make sure everything is stable." "Celine?" She took his hands. "Trust me, please. I need to do this alone." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, but he could see the determination in her eyes. "Okay," he said finally. "But you call me every day, and if anything goes wrong, I'll call." She left the next morning, and for the first time in weeks, Caleb was alone with his son, waiting to see if the woman he loved could win a fight against an empire. Celine called from the airport before her flight took off. "I'm about to board," she said, and Caleb could hear the nervousness in her voice. "You don't have to do this," he said again, knowing it was pointless. "Yes, I do. I'll call you when I land." "Celine, I love you." The word stopped Caleb cold. They hadn't said it before, hadn't even come close. But now, with her about to walk into a battle she might not win, she'd finally said it. "I love you too," he said, and meant it more than he'd meant anything in years. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Celine said, "I'll come back. I promise." "You better." She hung up, and Caleb stood in the kitchen holding his phone, feeling like his heart was on a plane headed 3 states away. Evan walked in, dragging his backpack. "Is Celine coming back?" "Yeah, buddy. She's just got some things to take care of." "Important things?" "Very important." "Oh." Evan nodded seriously. "She's brave." Caleb ruffled his son's hair. "Yeah, she is." The next 3 days were the longest of Caleb's life. Celine called every night, but the conversations were brief and tense. She'd met with her lawyers, filed additional motions, confronted her brother Julian in person. "He won't even look at me," she said on the second night. "He just sits there and lets Marcus's lawyers do all the talking, like I'm not even his sister anymore." "He's scared," Caleb had said. "People do stupid things when they're scared." "I know, but it still hurts." On the third night, she sounded different, exhausted but also relieved. "I'm meeting with Marcus tomorrow," she said. "Face to face, no lawyers, just us." Caleb's grip tightened on the phone. "Is that smart?" "Probably not, but I need him to hear what I have to say. And he needs to hear it from me, not through a legal team." "What are you going to say?" "The truth. That I'm done letting him control my life. That I'd rather lose everything than spend one more second pretending to be someone I'm not." Caleb leaned back against the couch. "And if he doesn't listen, then at least I said it." The meeting happened at a coffee shop in Midtown Manhattan. Celine chose the location deliberately, somewhere public where Marcus couldn't intimidate her. She arrived early and sat by the window watching the snow fall outside. When Marcus finally walked in, wearing a custom suit that probably cost more than Caleb's truck, she didn't stand up. He sat down across from her without asking permission. "You look tired," Marcus said. "I am tired. Tired of this. Tired of you." He smiled, but it was cold. You could have avoided all of this if you'd just stayed in line. Staying in line was killing me. Dramatic as always. Celine leaned forward. You want to know the truth, Marcus? I never loved you, not even close. And you never loved me either. We both knew this marriage was about power and money and nothing else. The only difference is I finally admitted it. Marcus's jaw tightened. You humiliated me. Do you have any idea what that did to my reputation? About as much as you're doing to mine right now. Going after Caleb? Trying to take his son? That's low even for you. He's a distraction. You're throwing away billions for some warehouse worker with a kid and a mortgage he can't afford. It's pathetic. Celine felt anger flare in her chest. He's more honest than anyone in your entire world. He doesn't lie. He doesn't manipulate. He doesn't pretend to care about people just to use them. And yeah, he's struggling, but at least he's doing it with integrity. Integrity doesn't pay the bills. No, but it lets you sleep at night. Marcus leaned back in his chair. So that's it? You're choosing him over everything we built? We didn't build anything. Our parents did, and then they handed it to us and told us to play nice. But I'm done playing. You'll regret this. Maybe, but I'll regret it on my own terms. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled an envelope from his coat pocket and set it on the table. What's that? Celine asked. A final offer. You sign over your shares, you publicly apologize for your behavior, and I drop the investigation into your boyfriend. You get to keep your dignity, and he gets to keep his kid. Celine stared at the envelope. And if I don't, then we go to court, and I destroy both of you. Achete. She picked up the envelope and turned it over in her hands. For a moment, she considered it. Considered how easy it would be to just sign, to end the fight, to protect Caleb and Evan from the storm she'd brought into their lives. But then she thought about the press conference, about standing in front of those cameras and telling the truth, about Caleb holding her hand and telling her she was brave. She set the envelope back on the table. No, Marcus's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. She stood and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. That night, Celine called Caleb from her hotel room. I told him no, she said. Caleb exhaled, relief flooding through him. Good. He's not going to stop. I know, but we're not stopping either. Celine was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm coming home tomorrow. Home? Yeah, to you, to Evan. That's where I want to be. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. We'll be here. But the fight wasn't over yet. The next morning, before Celine could even pack her bags, her phone rang. It was her lawyer. Celine, you need to see this. She opened her laptop and found an article waiting in her inbox. The headline made her stomach drop. Marcus Hale accused of financial fraud by former employees. The article detailed allegations that Marcus had been embezzling funds from his own company for years. Offshore accounts, falsified records, payments to shell corporations. 3 former employees had come forward with evidence, and the SEC was already launching an investigation. Celine read the entire thing twice, her hands shaking. Did you know about this? Her lawyer asked. No, I had no idea. Well, someone did, and they just handed you the biggest weapon you could have asked for. Celine called Caleb immediately. Marcus is going down, she said, barely able to contain the emotion in her voice. He's being investigated for fraud, real fraud, the kind that puts people in prison. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Does that mean it's over? It means he's too busy trying to save himself to come after us anymore. What about the company? Your shares? Whoa. I don't know yet, but my lawyers think the board will have to reinstate me. Or at least settle. Marcus doesn't have the leverage he thought he did. For the first time in weeks, Celine felt like she could breathe. She flew back to Michigan that afternoon. When she walked through the door, Evan ran straight into her arms. You're back, he shouted. I'm back, she said, holding him tight. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching them, and when Celine finally looked up at him, she saw everything she needed to see in his eyes. That night, after Evan was asleep, they sat on the couch together. So what now? Caleb asked. Now I rebuild. Not the company, me. What does that look like? Celine leaned her head on his shoulder. I don't know yet, but I think it starts with the foundation, with actually helping people instead of just running a corporation. You're really going to walk away from Beaumont Technologies? I think I already did. The second I left New York, I stopped caring about it. All I cared about was getting back here. Well, Caleb kissed the top of her head. What about your brother, Julian? I don't know. Maybe someday we'll fix things. But right now, I need to focus on the people who actually want me in their lives. We want you here. She looked up at him. I know, and that's the scariest part. Why? Because I've never had this before. People who love me for who I am, not what I can give them. It's terrifying. Caleb took her hand. You'll get used to it. Over the next few weeks, things slowly began to settle. The CPS investigation was officially closed after the caseworker filed a report stating there was no evidence of neglect or unsafe conditions. Marcus, too busy dealing with federal investigators and his own crumbling empire, never followed up. The board of Beaumont Technologies reached out to Celine with a settlement offer. They'd buy out her shares for a price that was fair, though far less than they were worth at their peak. Celine took the deal without hesitation. I don't want to fight them anymore, she told Caleb. I just want to move on. With the settlement money, she launched Second Chances officially. She rented a small office in Detroit and hired a team. Within 2 months, they distributed over $1 million in emergency grants to single parents across Michigan. Caleb helped where he could. He connected Celine with people from the warehouse, families struggling just like he had been. He sat in on meetings and offered feedback. And slowly, he started to see the impact they were making. One afternoon, a woman came into the office with her 2 kids. She'd just received a grant that covered 3 months of rent and childcare. She cried when she thanked Celine. You saved my life, the woman said. Celine hugged her. You saved your own life. We just helped. Caleb watched from across the room, and he felt something shift inside him. This was what mattered. Not the headlines or the lawsuits or the empire. This. Helping people who needed it most. At the warehouse, things improved too. Doug called Caleb back after his suspension ended and offered him a supervisor position. It came with better pay and benefits. You've been here longer than most, Doug said. And despite the drama, you're a good worker. We need people like you. Caleb took the job. And for the first time in years, he started saving money instead of just surviving. By spring, Caleb and Celine started looking for a house. Not a mansion, not anything extravagant, just a place big enough for the 3 of them with a yard where Evan could play. They found a 2-story house on the edge of town. It needed work, but it was solid. Celine paid the down payment, and Caleb didn't argue this time. They were partners now. In everything. The day they moved in, Evan ran through every room, claiming his new bedroom with the kind of joy only kids could manage. This is the best house ever, he shouted. Caleb and Celine stood in the kitchen, surrounded by boxes, and just looked at each other. We did it, Celine said. Yeah, we did. She kissed him, and Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. That summer, Celine's foundation expanded to 3 more states. They partnered with local organizations and started lobbying for policy changes. It was slow work, but it was real. Caleb stayed at the warehouse but started taking night classes in business management. Celine encouraged him, helped him study, and reminded him that it was never too late to build something new. One evening, after Evan was asleep, they sat on the back porch of their new house, watching fireflies in the yard. Do you ever miss it? Caleb asked. The old life? Boss. Celine thought about it. Sometimes. I miss the feeling of building something, but I don't miss the people, or the pressure, or pretending to be someone I wasn't. Do you regret walking away? She looked at him. Not for a second. Caleb took her hand. I'm glad you knocked on my door that night. Even though I made your life a mess? Especially because of that. She laughed. You're insane. Yeah, but so are you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that only comes when 2 people have fought through hell together and come out the other side still standing. Finally, Celine spoke. I've been thinking about something. What? Evan asked me the other day if I was going to be his mom. Caleb's breath caught. What did you say? I told him I'd like to be, if that's okay with both of you. Bosayat Ndisitukiaseni. Caleb turned to look at her, and he saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the fear that he might say no. It's more than okay, he said. Celine's eyes filled with tears. You're sure? Yeah, I'm sure. She leaned into him, and Caleb wrapped his arm around her shoulders. I never thought I'd get this, she whispered. A family. A real one. Me either, Caleb admitted. After Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd just be a single dad forever, barely holding it together. And now I think maybe we get more than one chance at happiness, if we're brave enough to take it. Celine kissed him, soft and slow, and Caleb felt the last piece of his broken heart finally click back into place. Christmas came around again, a full year after Celine had first appeared on Caleb's doorstep. This time, the house was warm, the fridge was full, and the tree in the living room was straight and covered in lights that actually worked. Evan had made ornaments at school, little construction paper stars with his name written in crayon. He hung each one carefully while Celine handed them to him, and Caleb adjusted the branches. Perfect, Evan declared when they finished. That night, after dinner, they sat in the living room together. Evan was on the floor playing with the toy cars Celine had bought him. Caleb was on the couch with Celine curled up beside him. Hey, buddy, Caleb said. Come here for a second. Evan ran over and climbed onto the couch between them. Caleb pulled out a piece of paper, something Evan had drawn weeks ago and stuck on the fridge. It was the same picture he'd drawn a year earlier. 3 stick figures standing in front of a house. You remember this? Caleb asked. Evan nodded. That's us. Our family. Yeah, it is. Caleb looked at Celine. And I think it's time we made it official. Celine's eyes widened. Caleb? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. It wasn't a ring, not yet, but it was a promise. I'm not asking you to marry me right now, he said, but I'm asking you to stay. For real. Forever. You, me, and Evan. A family. Come on. Celine's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Evan looked between them, confused. What's happening? Celine pulled him into a hug. We're going to be a family, buddy. Forever. Evan grinned. I know. We already are. And he was right. They already were. Later that night, after Evan was asleep, Caleb and Celine stood in the kitchen together, cleaning up the dinner dishes. You know what I realized? Celine said. What? I spent my whole life chasing things I thought would make me happy. Money, power, success, and none of it did. But this? She gestured around the kitchen, at the crooked drawings on the fridge and the mismatched dishes in the sink. This is everything I ever wanted and didn't know it. Caleb dried his hands and turned to face her. You gave up a lot to get here. I didn't give up anything. I traded one life for a better one. Even with all the mess, the struggles, especially because of that. Because it's real. And I'd rather have real and messy than perfect and empty. Caleb pulled her close. I love you. I love you too. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding each other, and Caleb thought about how far they'd both come. From that freezing night when a woman in a wedding dress knocked on his door to this moment, standing in a house they owned together, building a life neither of them had planned but both of them wanted. It wasn't perfect. There were still bills to pay, still challenges ahead, still moments when the old fears crept back in. But they had each other, and that was enough. Because love, Caleb had learned, wasn't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings. It was about showing up every day and choosing each other even when things got hard. It was about building something real in the middle of the mess and refusing to let go. Celine had walked away from an empire to find herself. And in doing so, she'd found him. Found Evan. Found a family that loved her not for what she could give them, but for who she was. And Caleb had learned that opening his heart again, after years of protecting it, wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing he'd ever done. Together, they'd built something that no boardroom or bank account could measure. Something that couldn't be bought or sold or taken away. They'd built a home. Not just a house with walls and a roof, but a place where they belonged, where they were safe, where they were loved. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The snow fell softly outside the kitchen window, blanketing the yard in white. Inside, the house glowed with warmth. Evan's drawings covered the fridge. The crooked Christmas tree sparkled in the living room. And two people who'd been lost had finally found their way to something worth keeping. A family. Imperfect and real and unbreakable. And as Caleb looked at Celine, he knew with absolute certainty that he'd do it all over again. Every struggle, every fight, every moment of fear. Because she was worth it. They were worth it. And that was the lesson neither of them had expected to learn. That sometimes the greatest things in life come from the moments when we're brave enough to choose love over safety, to choose truth over convenience, to choose each other over everything else. It wasn't easy. It never would be. But it was theirs. And that made all the difference.